ready to get started? Welcome to the 2 o'clock presentation, Navigating Your Migration to Microsoft 365. Today we have John Ryan, our Technical Solutions Specialist here at NCI, and Roger Lund, Solutions Architect at NCI. John works as one of our sales engineers, working with customers and engineers to iron out best solutions, you could say, helping with the quoting process, presenting mostly 365 computers, servers, storage. Roger evangelizes virtualization by night and is a solution architect at Network Center by day. He's had 20 years of experience in the industry. And yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and just get started.
Cool. All right, thanks, Jake. So, just to let you know, you're in the right session if you're looking for the Navigating Your Migration to Microsoft 365. Like Jake mentioned, my name is John Ryan. I'm a Technical Solutions Specialist. I've met a lot of you already on the phone, so it's nice to get some faces to names, and not everybody turns their camera on, especially me. Get too much glare. So anyway, so I've been at Network Center almost 10 years now. I kind of fudged the numbers a little bit on that. But previously I was at Microsoft supporting the network infrastructure for all of the Fargo campuses. So kind of a regional IT manager role. So typically what my role is to talk to people like you about technology, to find out what kind of technology interests you have, maybe struggles you're having, and then I take that information back and talk to somebody like Roger to come up with a solution to present to you guys. So a little bit about myself.
Magic 8-ball that I roll around.
Yeah, he shakes a magic 8-ball, and we come up with a solution.
Yep, works good.
A little bit about myself. I do some other things to kind of get away from the tech side of it. I build guitars. I'm in a couple of bands, and I love spending time with my family. So.
My name's Roger Lund. I'm a solutions architect at Network Center. I've been here about 3 years, about 20 years of industry experience. I've had a focus in VMware, cloud, storage, disaster recovery, and networking over my career. Experience in healthcare, call centers, financial, as a value-added reseller prior to being a Network Center. So. In my off time, I like to do vintage photography, so I like to shoot film. I also collect vintage cameras. I've got probably over 40 cameras, although they go back to the early 1930s. And then my son and I love to fish, and of course, just hanging out with the family. So, yeah.
So we got a lot of things to talk about today. I think we have 97 slides or something like that. Just kidding. So we're going to go through basically kind of these bullet points. What is Microsoft 365? So there has been a change from Office 365 if you're used to kind of that lingo. And what is Microsoft 365 and what does it mean to you guys as far as considering migrating to it? We're going to go through what licensing is right for your business. There's a lot of different licensing tiers, a lot of options. So we'll just touch on that. We're not going to get too deep into that because that's a kind of a black hole that you can fall into pretty fast. So
we might be here till 5.
Yeah. How do you know when you're ready to migrate? That's probably the biggest part of this is how do you prepare for it? What things do you need to consider? How do you make that decision to move into Microsoft 365?
We'll talk a little bit about some migration methodologies. Some of the considerations that you might go through as you kind of go through the exploration of this. And then we'll kind of go into some of the Microsoft 365 security products a little bit, just to give you an overview of kind of what you can do with conditional access or Defender and some of those things.
All right, so what is Microsoft 365? Obviously, you guys probably have some exposure to it. But Microsoft describes it as it's basically designed to help you achieve more with innovative Office applications, intelligent cloud services, and world-class security.
So who knows what that means?
Pretty salesy, right? So in layman's terms, it's cloud services from Microsoft that provide online applications and services. And the geeky version of it.
Yeah, so it's a SaaS platform, right? So it's Microsoft's SaaS platform. It's got the classic applications along with more modern cloud apps, right? A allows you to do a lot of things. But it's in a SaaS, which is, what's that mean? It's a consumable portfolio, right?
So briefly talk about some of the components of Microsoft 365. So the end user applications, cloud services, scalability, and security compliance. End user applications, we're all pretty familiar with these: Outlook, OneDrive, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Teams
Few
is
of us
something new.
recognize some of these, right?
Yeah. Teams is something that's going to be new with the platform. So a lot of times when people are thinking about, I have Outlook right now and I want to move to 365 for Outlook. What's the cost difference? Well, yes, there's a cost difference between the two, but you're also getting Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and all of the other applications in there as services, depending upon which level that you choose.
So in the cloud services, we've got a couple new things that some of you might or might not know. OneDrive is kind of like think about SharePoint and that technology that you're kind of used to having on-prem, but in a SaaS offering that is personalized. For each individual user, you can still share files between team members or between users there, but it's a SaaS offering, right? And then you've got Teams, which ties into SharePoint again. You see the common kind of across the platform, but lets you co-edit, collaborate, chat, and call, and have video conferencing and work on, documents in real time with each other, right? So it's, a good way to collaborate.
Yeah, so when you're talking to the business, you got to make sure to, bring up some of the other tools that are available with it, as opposed to it just being a, complete swap out for Outlook. Scalability and remote capabilities. It's user-based licensing, so it's adjustable on the fly. Now it depends upon, with the new licensing, they went to a 1-year licensing model. However, at any time you can upgrade within that year, but you can't downgrade. So now if you buy licenses, they do have an anniversary of 1 year. So supports a mobile workforce. So it's a cloud platform that people can log into from home, from the road, wherever you happen to be on a secure network. You can use applications throughout multiple devices. So if you have your desktop versus a laptop versus a tablet, you have even your phone, you can use the applications through that. It's a consistent application experience, so a lot of them are really similar within those platforms. So training your end users, it's a lower learning curve for that. And then again, the kind of Teams really plays into the remote piece of it with being able to do online meetings, so you don't have to have the Zooms and the WebEx and all of that kind of stuff. You can just use one platform for it.
Security and compliance. There's a lot here, but I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of it. So, security side, there is, identity protection, Microsoft Defender, DLP, Purview, Microsoft Endpoint, Intune, things like BitLocker. On the compliance side, you have the ability to pull custom reports for things like HIPAA, Compliance Manager. There's trust documents, which might be like, hey, what is my legal documentation around something like PCI? There's regional compliancy. There's data privacy documentation, and so it's kind of like a portal that gives you access to all those things, right, in one place. But all of these things, we could spend like 3 hours on. So we're gonna breeze kind of high level on some of the security stuff, but there's a lot there, right? So when we get into licensing, I'll kind of touch on some of the bundles that include some of these functionalities, because there's a lot here, right? So DLP, for an example, gives you the ability to, kind of get alerted when sensitive data is coming in or out of your organization, right? That's a nice feature to have, but that is only available in certain licenses, right? So there's things to think about when we're planning this. So.
And obviously, when you put your environment into the cloud, security is a big consideration for it, because it's no longer on site. You no longer can touch it and manipulate it yourself. It's up in the cloud. It's sitting on other servers on the Microsoft cloud. So security is, how secure is it? Everybody, that's probably one of the biggest fears for people to go into a cloud environment is we don't like the cloud because we don't feel like we have control over it when we put it in the cloud. So,
And I would say that's also probably the biggest risk for somebody that just goes through the defaults and doesn't change anything, right? If you just kind of go out and subscribe to one of these services and don't make any changes, you're going to leave yourself kind of wide open for a lot of security vulnerability, so. My favorite, licensing. Yep. Everybody likes licensing? Excellent. I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a monkey sitting on your shoulders and hitting you with a ball-peen hammer. So, the Microsoft licensing, it's actually pretty easy if you stay within the business grouping of it. So you have Business Basic, which is your Exchange, and then you get the online version of all of the Office applications, and you do get the Teams and the SharePoint and the OneDrive. So that's probably the basic version of what most end users would use. Now, if you need to have a downloadable version of the desktop apps, you'd want to go to Standard, and that allows you to download it onto a device, like get the full Office suite on your computer, laptop, desktop.
That being said, that 95% of the time, we're probably going to recommend Microsoft 365 Business Premium because it includes all of your licensure that you probably are going to want to take advantage of going to a SaaS platform like 365. So Intune, for example, allows you to create policies, right, to be able to do things like BitLocker, to be able to do patching, push, Adobe updates, or you can set screensaver timeouts per group of users. You could change password policies. You can, all the things that you would do kind of group policy in the past, you can kind of do with Intune, right? That's the idea is getting that control over your organization through cloud management, right? That also gives you mobile device management and things like that. Included is an information protection, included is Defender, which is an antivirus platform, included is conditional access, virtual Windows desktop, and Windows 10 business licensing, and some more things, right? This is just kind of like the major stuff, but you get a lot of licensing with that, and it's a pretty attractive price point.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is it's adding all of those security services, and that's actually, if you're familiar with the Azure P1, ADP1 licensing, that's all of the stuff you would get with P1, so it's kind of rolled into that premium license. So in case that wasn't enough for you,
we're gonna go through every box.
Here's a gigantic breakdown of basically those services that you get within each one of them. So when you're looking at enterprise mobility and security, that's where you're going to find all of your security options.
There's some interesting things here as well. If you look at this, it's basically letting you upgrade your Windows licensing, right, as part of that. So, that can be a big deal depending on where you are in your licensing or you're upgrading, Microsoft Defender for Business. There's a lot of things there that you can do. And there's also add-on licensing, getting more licenses, but you can add on licenses, things like being able to do EDR and, automated responses to events and security events and stuff like that. So a lot there. John, what did I miss?
There was like 40 boxes.
Okay,
you didn't talk about. Contributing factors. Okay, so this is how do you know when you're ready to move to or migrate to 365. So as an organization, what do you have to consider before making a move? Do you have aging hardware on-prem? That's kind of been, kind of a fork in the road. Do we continue to buy servers, or do we decide to go into 365 and migrate some of our data? So that's something to consider.
And the most important thing is who wants to upgrade Exchange anymore? Because come on. It's a painful experience, right? Every time there's a security vulnerability, what are you doing? You're patching Exchange. You're up at night. You're working long hours. You're trying to figure out why this one BlackBerry doesn't work. know, whatever that issue is, right? It's just one thing you don't want to have to worry about anymore. And to me, being, you know, an admin that's done this for 15 years plus, like, it's just going to be a painful process. So, yeah, no more upgrading Exchange.
And if you're looking for...
Or SharePoint, for that matter, if you have a SharePoint farm.
Yep. And if you're looking for a platform for collaboration, so if you're not used to having something where you can co-edit documents, you've been sending them back and forth, or
funny
opening
enough,
up a share.
right? We talk about these things, right? But the first bullet point is kind of what, like, if we back up like 3 or 4 years, that's like maybe, you know, 2018. That's what everybody wanted to talk about. I've got hardware. Let's talk about, you know, does it make sense to go to the cloud? What is the cloud? And then, you know, COVID happened. And then all of a sudden, this last bullet point became the most popular reason for people to want to go to 365. It's collaboration. How do I have calling on the same platform that I'm doing video chatting? How do I edit documents while I'm video chatting, right? In real time, without having 7 versions of the same Excel file that I have to go fix at 7 o'clock at night because, you know, people are entering data together in their different versions, right?
File lockouts, versioning, all that kind of stuff.
So, again, collaboration became like a big deal, right? Customers are working across the globe, and they're working from home, they're working mobily, and from different devices. You know, now all of a sudden, not just like does collaboration become a challenge, but you can start doing it, and now you have the tools to be able to secure those devices and manage those devices on the, you know, on the back end as well, right? So, all those things I said.
Yeah, and he kind of already covered this.
Get ahead of myself.
And patching is so fun. So what to consider when planning the migration. So you've decided, hey, I think we're going to go towards Microsoft 365. What do I need to consider within my environment while planning it? Do you have an understanding of the full capabilities of M365 and what services they provide moving forward? So before you can pick what services you want to move to 365, you got to know what's available, right?
Example is like, you know, you don't necessarily want to start planning dates until you decide like what licensing you're going to go forward with and what your teammates are going to use it for and how it's going to be utilized. So you got to kind of have that conversation with the business. Hey, what are you guys doing today? What, you know, do you use Excel? You know, are you going to be able to use calling? Is that something your department can take advantage of? You know, figure that stuff out.
Yep. Along with that, what new tools are you going to be implementing? So we all know adoption is a hard thing, right? Getting people to use new tools, getting people to save stuff to the cloud versus locally on their machines, or getting people to stop using flash drives to transfer files around or sending things through email. So what new tools will we be implementing that allows you to work more efficiently, easier with each other? What technologies will be replaced? So do you have a current chat program or a phone system that you're going to be replacing with this? And now the nice part about with 365 is you can do these things in phases, and you can have different rollouts throughout the process, so you don't have to do everything right away.
Talked about licenses a little bit. Remote access needs, you know. Do you have people that are just in the office going to be using this? Is it just in the state? Is it global? You know, what does that mean for conditional access? You know, there's some things to talk about there.
Authentication. You know, how are you going to authenticate your users if they're offsite?
What type of security requirements are you going to have? Is it, you know, 6-factor? No. Is it, you know, is it dual-factor authentication? What about dual-factor authentication? Is it going to be push? Do you want to be able to, like, you know, require somebody to actually open that manually because maybe you don't want some hacker to request it 89 times until somebody at 2 a.m. just goes, stop, you know, and they allow it, right? So there's a lot of things to think about there. That was kind of the last 2 points.
Yep.
All right, so I like to just walk through like a normal customer interaction. So we're going to do a little bit of a client check.
Yeah, I'm going to be the client.
interaction.
I'm going to be RJ Berger. That's Roger's choosing. I had a different name.
Nobody recognizes the show. Okay.
I am an IT director of an electric company. We have about 500 employees. 50 of those are remote employees. Right now we have on-prem Exchange. We're due for an upgrade for it. And the employees are looking for ways to collaborate. But we are conscious about cost per user because we have a lot of employees, 500.
So, John, tell me a little bit about like your environment when you guys are, obviously it's a electric company. How do you guys, use Exchange today?
We basically, talk internally a lot. We don't do a lot of external communications with it, except for with billing and everything. But for the most part, it's for internal emailing back and forth for projects and for accounting.
Do you do anything with SharePoint or any type of, intra-web?
Not currently. We have a file share, but so we just open up spreadsheets and whatnot.
Is that a need that you guys are looking at?
Being able to collaborate a little bit better would be nice and not have to worry about somebody else having a file open while I'm trying to access it.
What do you do today for phones? How do you use that for your business?
We just have a standard PBX system with PRI lines.
What I'm trying to do here is like feel out the conversation a little bit to see like what are some of the use cases that we can talk about. Because at the end of the day, John, RJ in this case, is going to be, excited about perhaps the migration to off-prem because he doesn't like the patch, right? But at the same time, I'm trying to feel out like what are the business needs and requirements that I can come back with to be able to like make sure this is a successful project for the business, right? So I'm asking some questions about, what are some of the challenges that you guys have today with Exchange, right?
Yeah, and that's going to really drive the conversation with leadership too, within an organization. Is what are we trying to solve here? What kind of issues do we have, or what kind of advantages are we going to get from this? Because if you just do it on a total cost of operation basis, it's going to be a harder conversation to have than if you can justify the tools that you're going to get with it.
Then I normally would ask, like, RJ, what do you do for collaboration today?
Right, just file shares on the server.
Right. And that's going to be a common thing. It's like, you might have a way today to be able to collaborate with remote users, or maybe you're using Zoom, right? Or some third-party application to collaborate on a one-on-one basis or in a group meeting, Some things that we see in the field quite a bit will be like Cisco, WebEx meeting or, some of these different platforms, right? And then maybe it's a separate product. A lot of times those don't have collaboration tools in them. It's just like a meeting platform, but they don't really integrate with the business very much. And then are you concerned about cost at all?
Yes. Okay. It's the last bullet point.
And then we'd get into some of the differences in those licensing points, like what does standard get you? What is business premium? What else is there? Maybe there's a requirement for more security, and there's you've got some E5 licensing and F5 licensing and some of those things that.
Or even if you have frontline workers, people who aren't going to be using
Good point.
Laptops or PCs, but they're out in the field, they need to get email. They have the F version of licensing for frontline workers, which is a cheaper license, so you don't have to pay $20 a user, per month.
So, when we ultimately start asking questions about the bigger picture, it's not that we're really trying to waste your time. We're really just trying to make sure that we're meeting the right business needs with the right licensing, making sure that we're setting you up to be successful to be able to manage these products in the future, right? So let's talk about migration a little bit. So there's a lot here, and I'm just going to kind of go through some of the different technologies and types of migrations and some of those things. Everybody know what IMAP is? The old school, almost as old as pop. But you've got standard IMAP migration, but there's some limitations there. So for an example, it's not going to pull in, calendaring a lot of times, contacts, depending on your provider, right? There's a lot of times there's message size limitations there. That can be a challenge. And so generally, we would recommend going through the admin center. And I'll get into it a little later, we generally do the last option when it comes to that. But if you're going through the migration, generally, we do mostly either a cutover migration or a stage migration. And generally what that means is we're going to migrate all mailboxes or a subset of mailboxes over a course, a phased approach, right? Kind of depends on how many you have a little bit. Microsoft does throttle, so there's a way to go in and reduce throttling, but it's still a thing. There's still, your internet speed between you and the cloud that will be some sort of a bottleneck at some point, right? So if you had like 100,000 mailboxes, cutover migration is probably just going to be out. Even if you had several hundred mailboxes, that might be a bigger challenge than if you had 10. So stage migration, is a batch process. It could be by department. It could be by location, different ways to do that. So there's a hybrid migration. Generally, we don't do a whole lot of those. That would be if there's some on-prem requirements that maybe you'd want to be able to do. Sometimes customers don't want to go all the way. They want some of that functionality, but they still want like their, mailboxes on-prem or something like that. So we'll see that. But honestly, most of the hybrid migrations are kind of something that we did like 5 years ago, right? It was kind of like the first phase of some of the customers getting into it. And maybe some of you are already running in a hybrid mode today. You don't have all services there, but you've got some services there. So 90, probably, high 90% of what we do is a third-party migration. And that's, you use a product. We use AvePoint Fly a lot. And this would integrate with whatever you're coming from, connect in, and then migrate to 365, right? And this is a per mailbox type of a platform. You would schedule a full, and then you'd schedule, incrementals, and then you'd schedule your cutover, and then you would do that at a per user mailbox. Separately, mail versus SharePoint versus OneDrive, those are all kind of separate things, right? Usually it's a pretty low cost. It's like a one-time migration type of a cost, but it's very easy to get predictable results with reporting on, here's all the files that were copied, here's what didn't copy, here, you know what I mean? And you can kind of then have that record of what got migrated or not, right? Much easier to read, much easier to work with support if you have some crazy, weird mailbox that Ross decided to keep here for 28 years, an encrypted, double encrypted file. No. Honestly, most of them go really well. But using third-party products, that's probably going to be the most common way for people to migrate. So there are some considerations here. Don't just roll the dice and be like, hey, you know what? It's today at 2 o'clock. I'm just going to go migrate, right? Check your Active Directory health, right? If you don't know if you have a healthy Active Directory, panic. No. You should though, pay attention to that, right? And when I'm talking about common stuff, maybe DNS is not in a good state. Maybe you had a domain controller die 2 years ago and you forgot to go clean it up with the correct methodology, right? Maybe you have an offsite that actually isn't replicating back correctly. Domain controller in an offsite location. Maybe you're missing, field information that you want to pull over, right? So there are some things to kind of go through there. Look at your Office and Windows to make sure it meets minimum requirements. Sorry, Windows 95 is not going to be there. Can't do it. Windows 7 or newer, Office 2016, right? Or if you go business premium, it's going to upgrade that stuff for you, right? So it'll be included. So verify that you own your DNS records externally and internally, I guess. If you can't create or modify those, that's going to be a problem because it's pointed at your Exchange server today. Now you need to point it out to 365. You have to figure out who owns that, who has access to that. Make sure it's a still current employee, or that if your provider's password hasn't, expired. Make sure you have MFA set up on it. All those things, right? Make sure you can get into it. Make sure it's compatible with Microsoft 365. Bob's DNS down the road might not be. But just make sure that, sorry, Bob, make sure that it, is ready to go, right? We talked about throttling a little bit. They now have this, so it used to be you had to open a support case and, wait for Microsoft to respond. Now you can go in once you start the process, and by just typing in keywords, it'll let you self-service that. So they've made that a little bit easier, but it is a certain time that they do it for, and again, it only improves it so much. Yeah. Bandwidth is important. If you have an ISDN connection, you might be in trouble. Try to understand how much data you have and make sure that you have realistic expectations. You might have a 2 meg connection and you have 2 terabytes of mail. I don't know. But just understand that that's going to affect getting that data up there, because you have to get the data up there. And that's where those migration tools, by the way, come in really nice, because you can maybe set that up a month ahead of time if you want. Usually you buy those licenses, or you would use an MSP's licenses for that for a certain period of time. So you can do monthly, or you could buy those licenses for those tools. But those can run way ahead of time. You can schedule that stuff, so it's not all of a sudden you're trying to do too much at one point in time. So think about what is authing inside your network to Exchange. Who here has a multifunction device? Right? Is it using basic authentication? Because that's not supported anymore, right? Is there a firmware update to get there? You might have to replace a multifunction device. We might have to set up some SMTP relays, right? And understand if you have multiple locations that you'd have to go into Exchange Online Admin Console, you'd have to create those relays, put in the IPs, do some of those things, right? But that still won't fix the really old Zebra printer from 2003, okay? Or some of these really old devices that I'm picking on Zebra because I just had a problem with one, but they don't mail, so. But my point is you might have a few old devices. So just think about some of that stuff when you're, just like, remember, who here dealt with the print nightmare? Anybody? Some printers, it was just not worth the battle, right? You could go get a newer printer and get a Mode 2 driver, and it's going to be the same way here. There's going to be some multifunction devices that won't support it. And generally, a lot of times maybe you have a print vendor that helps you manage those. Talk to your print vendor. Say, hey, we're looking to the 365. And most of them are going to be like, oh yeah, no problem. We have to do these updates on this one. This one needs to be replaced, but it's part of your service contract. We'll come out and swap it out. So it's, it's not too big of a deal. Just make sure you think about it at the time. And then communication. Talk to the business, plan. What is MFA? Make sure that your users understand that their world might change a little bit for being able to access these things, and talk about things like what is your security password policy today? How often do you change it? How about screen locking? How about, all that type of stuff? You maybe have changed that in years and years and years, but this is the time to do it. If you're going to be going, especially business premium, and you're looking at getting Intune, you've got that control now, right? Think about what that means to the business, what the business requirements are. What are your legal requirements from your insurance, right? Things like that. Now's the time to think about it before you implement it, and then have to go back 2 weeks later and make a change, and then everybody now is like, oh, well, now I have to put 6 extra characters in my password, or whatever, right? It's easier for the users out front to learn how to use the product. So,
Kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but that's okay.
You can talk now. I'm tired.
You're tired? Not enough cookies?
Not enough cookies.
So, yeah, like Roger was talking, security is going to be a big part of it, and that's probably going to change some of the experiences of your users. So, multi-factor authentication, which you may or may not be currently doing on-site through applications like Duo or something, that's available with Microsoft. Microsoft recognizes that all of your data is now essentially in the cloud, protected by a single password, right? So if you have a password breach, you're basically going to let somebody get access to whatever you have access to in 365. So implementing MFA is a practice that we do on all of our migrations.
Yep.
Now, by default, unless you guys don't want it to happen, we don't have.
And then
very
we'll
many
have
people.
a conversation first.
Yeah,
because
but we don't have very many people that say no. You don't want it to happen? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've got a Joe Blow desktop user. That's all they use. How do you use the MFA in that scenario? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I mean, you're going to use Microsoft Authenticator likely, right? And when they launch their Outlook or web, they're going to have to authenticate, right? It'll prompt, right? It's going to prompt. Now that's going to include Outlook. That's going to include Teams. That's going to include Excel. Now once it authenticates through one of those, then there's a token, period, right? By default, I'm not even going to try.
I call it a lease.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try it, but there is a default session length, right? That lasts a certain amount of time. And then, so for example, if you offer for Outlook, likely if you open Teams up, it's just open, right? If you would access SharePoint online and you off there, then you can open Outlook because it's all the same token that gets passed along. So.
Yep. And that's kind of where conditional access comes into play too. Is
It can, yes.
You can
control
adjust when that MFA comes up based on the environment the end user is in.
Yep.
So if they're on site and you don't want to MFA them, you can set up conditional access that they don't get prompted.
Or maybe you just want them to be prompted once every 2 days, or something. Again, instead of like every 24 hours.
Yeah, or just the portal. You allow email to go through. And we're not talking desktop authentication. That would be, upon login of the desktop. This would be launching an application or going into the web portal that actually touches the 365 environment.
Email encryption. Who is using email encryption today? Yeah, so, again, getting you email encryption as part of the portfolio, right? Now, I'm not saying that your third-party email encryption might not have some great features and functionality. Keep it, right? It'll still work, likely, but validate that, right? But it'll probably still work. But giving you the ability to hit a button in Outlook or on the web to encrypt the message, right? That's a big deal in today's world. You skipped a whole leg.
No, we talked about the MFA part of it there. And then we went right on to email encryption, so we jumped ahead. Actually, yeah. So anyway, back on the MFA piece of it, you can authenticate through different options. Text authenticator, you can do fob with the FIDO2.
Yeah, so like again, go back to your insurance and see what the requirements are there, because sometimes they might say text authentication isn't a thing they want. That might not be. So then you can adjust that policy, right? Fobs, maybe there's a no cell phone policy. Well, if you have a no cell phone policy, it's gonna be really hard to do MS Authenticator, right? Unless you're gonna buy everybody a cell phone.
Right.
So a fob might make sense, right? So, and then they can have it around their lanyard or keys or earrings.
You talked about that already. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this.
There we go.
So Microsoft Purview. So again, how many times has your organization sent sensitive information, right? Do you know that today? Maybe some of you do. Maybe you have a third-party product today that does DLP, right? Sometimes that's a device that sits between your firewall and your outside cable modem, right? So this is giving you basically a tool to get a insight into your SharePoint documents, your OneDrive documents, your email, all of that. Make sure there isn't things like HIPAA, PCI information, all that type of stuff out there, right? And you can even do things in Teams. So.
Yep, and this is, Purview is like an ingestion type model where you pay based on throughput, like how much you're going out with it. So it is an add-on function to it, but they do that with a few of the security applications, like for governance and everything like that. They actually have like a meter that just triggers while it's scanning everything.
Overall, the cost is fairly low.
Yeah.
Microsoft Intune. Who here has ever like worried about patch management? It's got to be at least one guy. Just that one guy. Excellent. So, I mean, this is a lot, right? So this is, mobile device management and patch management and vulnerability management. It's all of that stuff, right? You can do so much here. Has anybody used Configuration Manager in the past? Okay, Configuration Manager was like a portfolio of complex products that Microsoft had that let you, basically, do patch management, vulnerability management, and all that type of stuff. So really, they're taking that and group policy, and they're kind of doing this with it, right? And the idea is that you can set up rules and settings to deploy. You can scan for vulnerabilities. You can set password policies. You can configure BitLocker. You can do a lot. I pushed Adobe update to my test machine the other day, right? It was 6 clicks, I think, to go through the wizard, the entire wizard to do it. It's not like it's crazy complex. So there is some, you have to go through the first time and do the policies. Like you have to create some different computer policies and, go through your security policies and define, password, age requirements, screen timeout, all that type of stuff. So there is some baselining that you do, right? But ultimately, it lets you manage, deploy, patch your environment, right? And I'll get into Defender, but it gets you to do more than that as well, right? You can start responding to viruses and or events as well. So.
Yep, and if you're looking to move your entire infrastructure into 365, you're not going to have that local management, those group policies and stuff to push out. So you have to have a different platform to do that with. Microsoft relies on Intune for that platform to push out those group policies. Also, if you're authenticating to a local server for AD, you need to authenticate somehow, right? So you're doing device authentication then instead, or user authentication if you want to call it.
It takes away kind of like the need to be VPN'd to a point, right? Like a lot of times you have the VPN, everybody has to connect over the VPN. Well, now you have like, users that own their own devices, and company policy says that's okay, and you've got cell phone, personal and cell phones that are, being, in this. So it's like there's a lot to worry about there, right? This gives you that kind of ability to make sure, hey, if you're going to use your personal device, you have to be running this version of Firefox, or, yes, you still have to have a password. You can't have no password. Like you need to meet some business requirements for that, right? So. Defender. This one, I could spend, we're getting close on time here. I could spend like 2 hours just talking about Defender. Realistically, Defender is, how do I start? It's an endpoint protection platform. It's preventative maintenance. It's scanning for antiviruses in real time, but it's more than that. It's vulnerability management. It's detect and response. All of those things that you kind of want to be able to do. You can realistically consider replacing your antivirus with this. You could, if you're running a separate malware detection platform, you could, use this to do some of those things, right? That being said, understand that if you've got a team of, if you have a managed MDR today, and you want to move to this, you might need somebody to look through these logs. Because yes, it is, you can set up, with the add-on licensing, you can set up automatic detection and responses. However, you still need to look through those errors. Somebody needs to monitor it, right? It isn't a managed product in that sense, so you might need, to hire Bob, that you're mad about DNS, and have him come, help you. So it's a D product. You can deploy the AV very easily and quickly, But if you want to start doing more like advanced responses and vulnerability checking, and you can do in Intune, you can run vulnerability reports, see all the machines that are missing, and you can patch it. But then you can also see, maybe devices that have had infections, right? Or maybe there's risky applications, on certain devices. Ross over here loves to download like all kinds of stuff, right? So,
and the big thing too is there's Defender for Office 365, which is kind of a separate subset that's just for the Office applications and the collaboration tools. That comes standard with the premium license. And that covers that kind of stuff. So if you have, a Word document or something that gets infected, it's going to scan those. And then as far as the endpoint protection and all of that kind of stuff, that's usually an additional license to add that on.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can like license it for your servers and stuff too. So it's not just your desktop environment. So that's a deep product. Like I said, you can spend a lot of time, but here's the deal, right? Go back to the licensing. Really consider that business premium, right? It gets you that licensing to be able to start learning about that technology to see how that makes sense, right? It just comes with it as an added benefit, right? You're gonna want that licensing anyways because of all the conditional access and Intune. To me, those are like sells it right away. Well, now you also get a Defender, see how that does versus what you have today. Maybe it doesn't meet requirements. Maybe it's just the reporting you want out of it. Maybe it has a better report that you can't get today through your legacy semantic or something. So, Johnny, what are your final thoughts?
So in the conversations we're having with a lot of people, we're seeing a shift of people not wanting to continue with on-prem hardware or services. So we're starting to see, people moving away from that and going to more of the cloud-based services. It's a little bit more predictable cost with the subscription model. So it's a little easier knowing if I hire this employee, it's going to cost, $12.50 for Office for them, or for 365 for them, it's going to cost this much. For AV, it's going to cost this much. It's easier, predictable cost on a per person seat. It's kind of what everybody's going to anyway, is the subscription basis. Microsoft is continuously developing and coming out with more tools. We actually cover this in our NCI Lives. We have quarterly or kind of, every other month. We'll let you guys know what those changes are and what different tools are coming out.
Finally, I hinted this earlier, these are fairly complex. I'm not saying that we can't help you get through them, but I don't expect you all to go over lunch break and start migrating your users, right? We use third-party tools. We have experience with third-party tools. We have relationships with little vendors to be able to get through the really complex stuff. We'll help you do that, right? We'll love to get on the phone, talk about your environment, kind of like John and I did a bad job of exampling. But, ask those questions, figure out how it would help the business to get through it. And then it's kind of up to you. How much do you want to be involved in it? Do you want to do most of it? We'll set the framework. Do you want us to be 50-50? Or do you want us to do all of it and then just keep you in the loop and help you communicate to the business milestones and how to be successful?
Yep, and there's some things that you can do to help too, with like upgrading desktop versions of Office so that we don't have to go around and touch every desktop. You guys can help with that, and that'll help kind of reduce some of the costs.
There's a lot of things, yeah.
Yep. So we have this completely ridiculous resources, links. Obviously, there's a ton of things out there that can help you that are online to be able to help you through and everything. But the only URL that you really need to know is that one. So.
Or you could just.
Oh, it's not on.
Or you could just.
I think they got turned on over there.
It's on now.
Oh,
There we go.
Or you could just email r.j.burger@netcenter.net.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? We have a few minutes for questions. I'll bring the microphone over so people virtually can hear you.
I've got a stack of business cards up here, so if anybody wants, go ahead.
I just want to know if when the Defender is running or when you run Defender, does it slow down your browsing, your email, your PC?
It's pretty lightweight. Yeah, in my testing and deployments, that I've done, I have never noticed it, right? It is very lightweight compared to some of the more, especially next-gen AVs. So, and some customers might run, both at the same time. And again, they don't really jump on each other too much.
So 2 quick questions. One, what's the difference between the Defender that comes installed in Windows and the one through N365, or is there a difference? And I guess
Yes.
to the question, okay. Well, my second question may lead into some of that.
Yeah.
Who, and it's maybe kind of a wink to the 2 guys on stage here, but who can a customer of NCI talk to make sure they've got the right appropriate Microsoft licensing? I know I've tried to get that answer because I've got some business premium plans, some E3, and I don't know what the hell the difference is. And I don't know if there's certain services that NCI provides for us that if I change licensing, it will affect that. So it's not something I want to go do without letting you
Sure.
guys
Yeah, let me handle the first one first.
So you do the first one, and I'll do the licensing.
All right, perfect. So, so it is the same product underneath. The difference is that you have no control, visibility, automation without, tying it to some sort of a license, right? The definition is the same running on it. It's just not intelligent, right? There's no behavioral, there's a lot of that type of stuff. So again, it's how do I see what's going on to be able to know that if I need to make changes to my policies, And again, that's a deep conversation. I'd love to have a one-on-one, and we can kind of go into that. So.
And on the licensing side of it, we do have licensing agents at Network Center that can help you with renewals, with changing licenses, with adding users. A lot of times we can add a user into the portal that doesn't include any kind of, engineering time or anything like that. We can just set up a new account. You guys can go in and configure it and everything. The other piece of it would be as far as the correct license for it. We do have the Microsoft desk at Ingram that we can get on the phone, and they do a really extensive job about talking about your end users and helping pick that license level that you would need. They know all the stuff that comes in on the back end of it, a lot of the stuff that's not necessarily highlighted in that graph, and they can explain the differences between the licensing very clearly. So, and that's a free service as well. So,
Great question. Who else has a question? Is there anything remote?
Nope.
Awesome.
John? Okay.
Roger
Okay.
Lund, John Ryan, thanks guys. Appreciate the time.
thank you.
Thanks for attending.